Moana, my fellow exiles, Talkative try here in both of your ears with another Path of Exile 2 video. Today we are talking about some exciting Path of Exile 2 news tidbits. We're looking at the massive passive skill tree that has been patched together by community member Bear Shadow in the Path of Exile 2 Discord, and we are testing my new mic setup. I was able to buy a new microphone thanks to all of your support in the lead up to Path of Exile 2's early access launch on November 15th, and I want to know how it sounds. So let me know in the comments below. Do I need to make some further adjustments? Can you hear me in both of your ears? I really hope that you can. And if you'd like to continue supporting the channel, make sure you hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. That is the absolute best way to push my videos out to more and more exiles and to grow my channel in the lead up to Path of Exile 2's early access launch and beyond. Now, let's get to the Path of Exile 2 news. First of all, check your emails, my fellow exiles, because there is another Path of Exile 2 closed beta test ongoing from September 3rd to September 10th, Tuesday to Tuesday. It's under NDA. We will never know what is happening in the exact test, but we do know that they are not choosing anyone based on hardware specs or experience. It is a purely random draw. I am not in it. I don't know any other big content creators that are in it either. It looks like a few people in our Discord and comments did get into it. And if you haven't checked your email already, make sure you go and do so if you want to play Path of Exile 2 before it actually launches on the 15th of November. We don't know what they're testing. We're guessing it's Acts 1 and 2 because I don't think they're going to test anything that hasn't been revealed to the broad public in case there are leaks, but I could always be wrong. Next piece of a little bit of news, I appeared on Palsteron's channel on a PalTalk talking about Path of Exile 2. Lots of P's there. It was a splendid time. I loved chatting with him. We talked about content creation, Path of Exile 2, his skepticism, my unbridled hype, and it was a great time. The link to that talk will be in the description below. All right, now for what all of you have been waiting for, the massive passive skill tree in Path of Exile 2. Here it is, and this is why I haven't covered it before. Grinding Your Game specifically asked me not to talk about it, and not to record footage of it. However, with Gamescom, a bunch of videos came out with the passive skill tree unveiled. And this footage, and this particular picture, pieced together by Fair Shadow, has been posted in the Path of Exile 2 Discord, which has Path of Exile developers in it, and nobody has said to take it down, and nobody said that this is not okay to talk about. So I'm going to chat about it here today with all of you because it's quite exciting. And I actually have on my other screen here the Path of Exile 1 passive skill tree to compare it to. Now, looking at the Path of Exile 1 skill tree and then flashing back to the Path of Exile 2 skill tree, you can notice one immediate thing, and that is the Path of Exile 2 skill tree is bigger than the Path of Exile 1 skill tree. I don't know how much bigger, I'd guess around 200 to 300 nodes, but it is definitely meatier. And it's even missing that middle section for the Scion. There's still a bunch of stuff out here where the Scion can branch out and basically go anywhere, right, in its own starting area. It's missing that section, and it's still way meatier. It might have 2,000 nodes, everyone. This is absolutely ridiculous, and it's going to allow for so many different build possibilities because remember, classes in Path of Exile 2 aren't attached to any specific skill tree. You simply have a different starting location, and that is it. And builds will be pretty darn variable in Path of Exile 2 because unlike in Path of Exile 1, where all these pathings are very straight, there's not a lot of shortcuts, all the wheels are wheels, they're circles, there are semicircles, there isn't anything irregular in the Path of Exile 1 skill tree. Well, if we go to the Path of Exile 2 skill tree, that is not true at all. Yes, wheels still do exist, but there are tons of shortcuts. There are tons of different looking cluster types. Everything is curved there. It's just so much more varied. And it appears that different clusters are shaped in very specific ways. For example, if you take your eyes down over to here in the bottom of the tree where my cursor is, this is obviously a sword. All of these nodes probably have to relate to swords. If you go over to here, where my cursor is once more, This is obviously a crossbow. All these nodes likely related to crossbows. If you swing on over here, we see a spear. This right here could be a bow. Once again, this could be another spear. Up here, I mean, it's looking like they're actually going to be basing the shapes of the clusters on the actual passives within said clusters, which is pretty awesome design. The design is wacky and weird, almost like the Atlas passive skill tree in Path of Exile 1, a design that I really love. It's not asymmetrical in the slightest. If you look at the left-hand side of the tree here, here's a circular node with a little diamond node here. If you go swoop all the way across it, you can see that there's a double-sided axe or something over here, and then just a diagonal kind of mountain node right here. Then you can see there's a skull emoji where my cursor is right here. There's like, what is it? A parabola. Oh gosh, the shape, trapezoid. I don't know the shape. Correct me in the comments below. There's a weird shape here. There's a swirly right here. There's obviously some sort of wave right here. And there are shortcuts all throughout to passives and keystones and the like. It's awesome. And I love that sort of design, and they're just going absolutely weird with it. And everyone, of course, this is kind of how Path of Exile 1 started, but they shifted more and more toward this sort of design where everything is pretty symmetrical on one side to the other. All the jewel slots are in the same place. They're all wheels. They don't have funky shapes. But we'll see if they keep this sort of design for Path of Exile 2, because, again, I never showed the tree because they said the skill tree is constantly evolving and it's not final. But I think because we're getting so close to early access, they're okay with showing off this tree to the broader public, even though there's likely going to be a bunch of changes happening during early access. If you look at the patch notes for Path of Exile before 1.0, they had constant passive skill tree resets because they were constantly updating the passive skill tree. The exact same thing is likely to occur during Path of Exile 2's early access period. You should not get attached to any one build that you're creating, any one path through the tree, any one particular skill gem or item, because there are going to be vicious and wild changes happening all throughout the early access period. And I think that's something that Grinding Gear Games really will need to communicate to the community so they understand, okay, things are constantly going to be shifting. I shouldn't really think that this is a busted build that it's going to work forevermore. It could be nerfed the next day or even that night. Changes will be constant and they will be monumental. I want to point out this cluster, this little area right here, if I can actually get on it. Look how interesting this is. Look how wavy everything is. I just, the designs here are wild, and I'm sure these represent something that I'm totally missing right now. Maybe I'll need to study it a little bit more. But this area right here is the only area that's kind of similar. I wonder if these are very specific shapes. You know, now that I'm looking at it a little bit closer, these almost remind me of constellations in the sky. Looking at all this, I wonder if they're going for that sort of vibe. You know, in Path of Exile 1, the latest expansion, Settlers of Kalgur, the Kalgur talk a lot about star power and how they get power from the stars. I wonder if the end game will go a little bit more into the Kalgur and away from Rayclast and talking more and more about not just virtue gems, but star power and constellations and the like. That'd be kind of interesting. That's a wild theory that I'm just going to shoot out there in this video right now. Now, before I close out this tree, a few more notes about the passive skill tree in Path of Exile 2 for people who might be new to the channel and new to Path of Exile 2 in general, but it's still a great reminder for veteran players too. This isn't the only passive skill tree that you will have availability to. You will also have availability to another smaller passive skill tree called an ascendancy tree. This is something that you can empower your character with. You'll be able to choose from 3 of them upon the 1.0 launch of the game. Upon the early access, there might only be 1 available for each class. But this is far more specialized, and it gives you access to far more powerful passives and even skills in some circumstances. And the specialization there that's happening in Ascendancies, as we can see in Path of Exile 1 right now, is also happening in the Path of Exile 2 entire skill tree. Because in the videos and the exposure I've had to this skill tree when I've played in LA in March and June of this year, many of the nodes specialize you in certain aspects of the game. They're not broad. And this has been reiterated by the developers themselves. The passive skill tree helps you specialize into certain facets of building up your character. That's why life isn't on the passive skill tree anymore, because life is so generic and so broad and it can be used on every single build. And if you're not picking up life on the passive skill tree, you're messing up. That's a trap that lots of people, that's not a trap, that's a fault of the game design in Path of Exile 1. There's life on the passive skill tree. It increases your survivability a ton, so everyone feels like they have to pick it up. Grinding Gear Games does not want to have any mandatory nodes on the tree. They want to encourage diversity of pathing through the tree, diversity of passives that you are choosing, helping increase the diversity of overall builds in the game itself. They don't want the illusion of choice to be super strong. You know, in Path of Exile 1, Chris Wilson has talked about the fact that there are optimal ways to path through the passive skill tree, and there needs to be bad choices on the tree. That is an okay thing to include in the game. I'd argue that's an excellent thing to include in the game, but you shouldn't have areas of the tree that you need to go to. You know, the Constitution area of the tree in Path of Exile 1, all the life nodes along the path of your skill tree. You don't want that to be mandatory. So everything in Path of Exile 2 skill tree should be specialization focused, and optional is a bad word, but it's the word that I'm going to use. It should be buffing certain aspects of your build, not mandatory on all builds. One last tiny thing I'd love to point out here in this video about the passive skill tree, and that's this centerpiece right here. The portrait of your character comprises the center of the screen. This particular character is a ranger. I love that that and your ascendancy are likely going to be in the center of the skill tree, and you're going to be branching out from that little area. It's a nice little touch added in Path of Exile 2. Oh, and I totally forgot to add that you also get a secondary passive skill tree based on your weapon swap, and you have a set of points between 20 and 30 that you can allocate to certain nodes in one weapon set versus another weapon set, but we'll get to all that complexity in a different video. Before we close out this particular video here, I just wanted to let all of you know there will be a Still Sane pod coming up with Silver XYZ, Dreamcore, and Jorgen about Path of Exile 2, likely within the next week and a half. Also, I will be returning to streaming on Tuesday night at 7 o'clock p.m. Eastern, so make sure you tune in for that. We're going to talk all things Path of Exile 2, and it's going to be a wonderful time. As I led the video with, thank you all for your support. You are making this possible for me to really build this up into something real. And I really hope when Path of Exile 2 launches, maybe I can turn this into something really, really tangible and build something great with all of you and be able to do this a lot more than I do right now. It would be wonderful. Thank you for your support. I'll see you in the next video. Talakura, my fellow exiles.